Hey everyone, it's Carl, and the Savage Worlds rulebook only has about 200 pages. But I still find there's rules or there's things that I kind of forget about or I have to, keep focusing to make sure I follow them. Or worst case, players try to pull a fast one over me and I gotta reel them back.
It's a savage world, strange as a weird war. It's a savage world, classics to explore.
Hey everyone, it's Carl again with Tabletop Tango, and look at the bubbles, do the stuff. Would love a subscribe, would love a like, would love you to go to the website and visit us and support us and all that good stuff. So anyway, what do I really want to talk about? I am not going to talk about GM kind of strategies and how you do things like, don't do a notice, do the 3 clue rule or any of that stuff. What I want to talk about specifically is rules of the game that I kind of mess up or I forget or I have to keep them in my mind, or players sometimes do wrong and you have to remind them. If you've got ideas or you've run across these things or you go, wow, I always forget this thing, but here's how I handle reminding myself, put them in the comments. That would be awesome. Then everybody can learn from each other and that would be sweet. So let me, in no particular order, just run through some of my notes. One of them, when it comes to character creation, that you have to keep an eye on, and it's not because people are cheating, but it's so easy to forget it, and that's the skills are tied to the attributes. So it's easy for someone to spend a point on a skill, right? And then forget that that only works up until you match the linked attribute. So then it's 2 points. Very easy to forget that. So you run into characters, if you don't pay attention to it or help players get through that, you run into characters that have, incredible shooting, incredible this and incredible that, and you're going, holy smokes, you got a D4 in smarts. How did you get so good at research or whatever, right? And it's because we forget about that. So one of the things I always forget to talk to players about or focus on is the strength requirements for weapons and armor. Remember that person with a D4, they're supposed to be not as good from carrying stuff and, the heavyweight armor and stuff like that. And so I forget that, but I need to focus on it because there's real ramifications. If you are using a weapon or armor that's higher than your strength, it affects pace, it affects damage you do. All those things are really important. And a player who's putting a lot in strength, there's kind of a reason, right? He wants to be able to take advantage, or she wants to take advantage of some of those things. Somebody who's putting D4 in strength, don't make it a dump stat. Make it have some impact. Keeping on to gear, weapons, I don't know how many times I forget to enforce the snapfire rule. I've got people running around with high-powered, big weapons. They're very excited about it, and then they'll move from one position to another position to want to fire. And it's like, remember, dude, you have a penalty to do that. That is part of what makes that weapon interesting. So don't forget that one. Chase rules, another one. It's so easy to do so much wrong. Just read them over and over and over again. Before you run a chase, read the chase rules again and totally understand them. Dramatic tasks is one that I do pretty well. I like to run dramatic tasks, but what I thought about when I was kind of thinking about what I could do better is how I put the number of tokens required into play. And part of it is I have to think about the Benny economy, right? Because when people are trying to solve a dramatic task, their biggest currency is the Benny, right? To support somebody, they rolled really poorly, so they're going to throw Benny because they have just a few more tokens and they can see the finish line to get there, and somebody right after them has a club who's not going to go. It's a big deal, right? So one of the things I think about, or I try to think about, is where that dramatic task is happening. Dramatic tasks don't always have to be the end of the adventure. Right at the end, something big, you're stopping the cultists, you're defusing the bomb, you're starting the engines, whatever. It doesn't have to be at the end. There can be dramatic tasks in the middle that kind of set things up or set things in motion, just like you could do a quick encounter to do similar things. But in the center, when you're in the middle, unless players have a lot of bennies and you're trying to bleed some of those bennies for a reason, I make the difficulty a little less so that they don't have to spend all their bennies just to try to succeed this dramatic task. And then if you're at the end and they've got a lot of bennies, maybe it should be a little harder because they've got something currency to spend. What are you going to spend it on anyway? Game's almost over, or session's almost over. So why not make it a little tougher, make them spend some bennies? Just something to think about, right? Um, Oppose rules is another thing. And this isn't me, this is players. Boy, they love to roll dice, right? As soon as you say, hey, something's happening, they've got the dice out and they're rolling them. And it's so much easier even on a virtual tabletop. They're just clicking the button. And it's like, slow down. If it's an opposed roll, the person who's taking the action has to roll first, and then somebody has to roll over it. So if your players are like jumping the gun to, throw something out, like I'm doing an athletics check versus someone else, and they throw the dice out, it's like, hold on, I was doing it. You've got to wait. And it's good for you, right? Because then you know your target, what your target number is. The problem is when players do that and they roll like, a 5, they go, hey, I succeeded. I don't know if you succeeded or not. I haven't even done anything yet. So something to keep in mind, try to, keep them under control. I tell you, the first couple times that they roll like a bunch of explosions and get a 25 or something crazy, and you go, oh, well, you're going to have to re-roll because I haven't rolled your target yet. They start getting a clue, right? Going back to dramatic tasks, I said these were in no particular order, but going back to dramatic tasks, the unique skill, the narratively coming up with something that's unique each round that builds onto why you're doing what you're doing versus allowing players to just go, well, I'm going to use this skill, and now I'm going to use this skill, now I'm going to use this skill. That might be okay, and I'm not saying it's not the right thing to do, but I think I should avoid that a little bit more. Even in my example I gave, at some point I went, yeah, okay, this person pretty much can only do this one thing, so we'll let them get away with that. But don't do that regularly. I try to avoid that. Combat and firearms. It's interesting. It has, people always talk about all the advantages. You got a target number 4. Why would I ever want to go in the melee, right? Why not just shoot them all the time? Well, remember, there's a lot of things that play into that you got to remember. One of those things is ammunition. And I think players who have a high rate of fire weapons, and I'm one of them, right? Because I love to play shooter guys with, rock and roll and all that kind of stuff. They forget how much shells they use, how many bullets they use. It's not 1 for 1, right? Remember, rate of fire 1, 2, and 3 doesn't mean you use 3 bullets. It means you use a lot of bullets. You got 5, 10 onward up that you're using, and then that'll deplete a magazine really quick, which means if they only have a limited number of magazines or they have a limited number of shells available to them, that's that's a big deal, and that allows for that dramatic interaction where, yeah, you can throw a lot of lead downstream or down the field, and you're going to run out of shells. And before you can load, now the guy gets that chance, that the melee guy's got a chance to close the distance and, start attacking you. And we know that a lot harder to fire in melee, especially, unless you got a pistol or something, and now it's against parry. So there's real impact there. So something to keep in mind, especially in games that have limited amount of ammunition available. Like I'm playing a Deadlands Lost Colony, and as you know, they don't really have manufacturing capabilities like they used to. There's a lot of people who are loading shells. Bring your spent cartridges, and they'll reload them for you and all that kind of stuff. And so somebody who's not tracking their ammunition and forgetting about it and shooting a lot, and then using their rate of fire, it becomes a big deal. So got to keep an eye on that sometimes. When we talk about healing in combat, that's another thing. Remember, it's 10 minutes per wound level, not just 10 minutes, right? So it costs more time the more wounds that you're dealing with, right? So that may not be important if you're walking around the wilderness and just killed some bandits and it's fine, and now you got a day before you hit the next place. That's fine, no worries. But when you're in a dungeon and you are waiting patiently, the short rest, and there may be wandering monsters, or, somebody may know you're there now and they're preparing and you don't want to give them enough time to prepare. Hey, it could be a big deal. So something I always forget about, but, do I get bent out of shape about it? No, not really, but sometimes it's dramatically important. To keep up with combat, or, area effect weapons, a thing that always people ask about is evasion. Certain things can be evaded, certain things can't. The most important thing to remember is if it's not written in the description that it's evadable, then it's not. No debate. No debate on evade. If it's not in description, it means it's not evadable. Okay? Just keep that in mind. Another thing to keep in mind that I always forget when we're on a tactical map and things are happening is gang up bonus is negated by people next to you. So if you're attacking somebody and they're in a line and there's two of them and there's two of you, you don't get a +2 because or a +1 because you've got a partner with you attacking somebody. He's got somebody next to him too. So that negates some of that gang up bonus. Easy to forget. Easy to forget. In combat or in, the rapid round around, you can ready 2 items per turn as free actions. So grabbing a knife, grabbing your gun, you remember out of an easily accessible location, right? Got a holster, you got the knife. Great, you can do those 2 actions easily. But it takes an action to go above 2. So that's something that rarely comes into effect. But if players do want to go gonzo and they're like, they fired their weapon, they ran out of ammunition, they're tossing that, now they're doing something else, and they want to pull another gun out, and they want to do... You got to keep that in mind. I always forget about that. Surprise at the beginning of an encounter. Though folks who surprise the other folks, they're on hold at the start. We're not dealing action cards or whatever. We can deal them to those as the rules define, but the folks who surprised are on hold at the beginning of the round. And that is important, right? Because now you have that opportunity to interrupt. You can go when you need to go, that sort of thing. Interesting thing that I think folks forget about, and I don't forget about it, but it's something that I thought through a little bit, is it doesn't always, failure doesn't always have to be catastrophic. It can always add just, you can leverage bumps and bruises. So somebody's jumping across that chasm and they fail to roll, maybe not critical, but they fail to roll. Maybe they're hanging on the edge, they're pulling themselves up, but they get some bumps and bruises, as opposed to, oh, you failed, I guess you fell. Or, some more catastrophic thing happened. I mean, it's still bumps and bruises, that's a problem, right? That's a -1 on rolls. That is not... that still hurts, right? But it's not as bad as, you fell 300 feet and now you're dead, right? So that's some of my thoughts on things that I kind of remember, sometimes forget, or I think are important to keep in mind, or players sometimes forget, whatever, right? So those are some of my ideas. If you've got other ideas or the things you run into, or you know what, maybe I even got them wrong when I was talking about them, yeah, let me know. That's my reading, and I just said that I do things wrong, maybe. So let me know, and look at the bubbles, do the stuff. Again, like, subscribe, go to our website, support us, contact us, send us a note, whatever. It'd be cool. So again, I'm Carl with Tabletop Tango, and appreciate you watching, and we'll catch you next time.
It's a savage world, strange as a weird war. It's a savage world, classics to explore. It's a savage world in the land of the